going to put an upward pressure on price. This is going to be passed on to some form. And but there are people who are absolutely saying it's going to lower costs. It's not going to lower costs. These are going to drive up costs. You put more people in the system, you will drive up costs. You raise taxes on devices, you will raise on bedpans and wheelchairs and whatever else, and people's bandages and tongue depressors. It will raise costs. So that's the reality. And so, the way Washington works, this is where people get very cynical. And the reason why the deficits will skyrocket on the health care bill, ultimately, so the way Washington works is this: the law is passed. The entitlement program will remain in many respects. That's what often happens. And then what will happen? But the other side will happen. Anything that pays for this thing, there's $500 billion in Medicare cuts. Many of the hospitals, nationwide endorse the bill. But they'll be at my doorstep very soon asking me to repeal those Medicare cuts that affect the hospitals. The device companies are going to be fighting around the clock, so I would if I were one of them too, to get rid of the device tax. Anything that pays for any of this will be much of it will be watered down or eliminated, but the entitlement will remain and the costs will go up dramatically. That's kind of the cynical view of Washington. And the Congressional Budget Office, by the way, is composed of very good and honorable people. They're professionals. And so when they say, well, the Congressional Budget Office said it will lower the deficit over 10 years by $138 billion. Well, they're dealing with the numbers that were given to them. And what they will tell you, they have to make assumptions. The CBO, they make assumptions. And many of those assumptions are very bad assumptions. But they're the only assumptions that they can make. Because the CBO is not clairvoyant. They cannot forecast or predict what a future Congress may or may not do. They know that a future Congress is going to try to change this law in some ways. They know that's going to happen, but they can't cost that out or score it because they just can't predict what the Congress from 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years from now will do. They know that, and when they scored that bill out, they knew what they were doing. They said, well, it's 10 years. They're looking at the first 10 years, even though they understood that many of the program benefits don't begin to take effect for 4 years. But many of the revenues will start coming in the first year. So they understood that you were looking at maybe, in many cases, 10 years worth of revenues against 6 years of programs. And so you can understand how these numbers then they become more explainable from the CBO standpoint, but the reality is much different because we all can read and we all understand what will happen here. And in fact, they just updated their numbers. In fact, I'm going to just pull out one little piece of information for the good of the order, then I'll let you all go home. We're here 25 minutes longer than I promised you'd be. But I just have this little piece of information from the Congressional Budget Office, presentation to the Institute of Medicine, Health Costs and the Federal Budget by Doug Elmendorf, Director. Rising healthcare costs will put tremendous pressure on the federal budget during the next few decades and beyond. The CBO's judgment that health legislation enacted earlier this year does not substantially diminish that pressure. Now that's a tremendous understatement, but nevertheless, he said. And then he goes on, and I won't get into the law again, but the law will be changed in the future in ways that will make deficits worse. This is the head of the CBO. Okay? CBO estimates the effects of proposals as written and does not forecast future policy changes. We have emphasized that the legislation maintains and puts into effect a number of policies that might be difficult to sustain over a long period of time. For example, legislation reducing the growth rate of Medicare spending per beneficiary from about 4% per year for the past 2 decades, about 2% per year for the next 2 decades. But they go on, and they will also tell you here too, at the end, conclusion, putting the federal budget on a sustainable path would almost certainly require significant reduction in the growth of federal health spending relative to current law, including this year's health care legislation. Fancy way of saying it, this health care law is going to drive costs up, not down. I mean, they're pretty clear about this.
Not a question. Not a question. A couple days ago, you had your birthday.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me, Jerry.
You turned a big 5-0.
I did.
Everybody should wish him a happy birthday.
Oh. Well, all right. So I turned 50. That's true. It's true. Thanks for reminding me. Thanks for reminding me. But hey, I feel pretty good though. But
He's a young man.
yeah, I feel pretty good at the age of 50. You know, well, but thanks for that. I won't sing the birthday song either. Because I don't want to embarrass myself. But, again, thank you all for coming out. I'll stick around for a few minutes, take any questions or comments you may have. Thank you.